Anyone who has sat idling at a grade crossing while a mile of freight grinds by has probably caught sight of something strange painted onto the flank of a particular car. White block capitals on weathered steel, 3 words long. Do not hump. It reads like somebody's joke. And it isn't. That stencil is a hard safety directive attached to one of the roughest physical processes anywhere in the movement of American freight. What does a short phrase sprayed on a boxcar have to do with gravity, deliberate collisions, and shipments valued in the millions? Stay with me and I'll show you. Everything here traces back to a puzzle the industry has been wrestling with since roughly the 1850s. Bring a freight train into a large yard, and it may have 80 or 90 cars behind the power, each one bound for a completely separate place. The boxcar up front could be headed toward a distribution center outside Houston. Directly behind it, a tank car might owe a delivery to a chemical facility in the Philadelphia area. 3 positions back, a covered hopper could be routed to a Kansas City grain elevator. What put them in the same consist was nothing more than a shared run of mainline. Beyond that, they have no reason to travel as a unit. Somebody has to break them apart, sort them out, and stitch together fresh trains aimed at where the freight is actually going. The traditional answer, used for generations, went by the name flat switching. A yard engine would drag and shove cars across a spread of parallel tracks, working single cars or shortcuts into the slots where they belonged. Effective, certainly. Also agonizingly slow. Give a flat switching yard a full crew and a whole shift, and you might get a couple hundred cars classified. Meanwhile, the network kept expanding through the closing decades of the 19th century and into the 20th, until the car counts moving through the big junction points climbed past 1,000 a day and kept going. Flat switching simply ran out of road. Which is when railroads reached for the most ancient force available to them: gravity. The hump yard gets built around a man-made rise, usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 35 feet at the crest, placed between the receiving tracks where arriving trains sit and the classification bowl where the outbound consists get put together. On paper, it could hardly be simpler. A switcher pushes a cut of cars up the grade toward the summit. Right at the top, a worker pulls the pin on the leading car, or on a short group of cars all traveling the same direction. Once released, that car keeps going on nothing but its own mass, accelerating on the downgrade as it drops toward the bowl. Simple, though, is not the same as gentle. Below the crest, the rails split apart through a cascade of switches known as the ladder, dividing again and again into dozens of individual classification tracks. Every one of those tracks belongs to a specific outbound train or destination block. While the car is still rolling, the switches ahead of it get thrown to steer it down the right path. Then, at the far end of that track, it drives straight into whatever is standing there and couples with a bang that carries to every corner of the property. Car follows car over the summit, and down in the bowl, one train after another assembles itself. Nothing about it stops, and nothing about it wastes motion. In a busy yard, the interval between cars cresting the hump can drop to 15 seconds. Germany got there first. A classification yard opened at Mülheim-Speldorf in 1876, the earliest one on record. Within a few decades, the method had made the ocean crossing and taken hold throughout the American system. Those first American humps look primitive now. Men threw the switches by hand. Brakemen actually rode the cars downhill, hauling on handbrakes to manage how fast they went. A car moving too quickly would hit the standing cut at the end of its track hard enough to hurt both the equipment and whatever was loaded in it. A car moving too slowly would die somewhere short of its destination, forcing a switcher to come in behind and shove it home, a chore railroaders call trimming. Here is the piece nobody quite grasped in those years. Switches were not the problem. The grade was not the problem. Braking was not the problem. Velocity at the instant of coupling was the problem. Take a freight car loaded to 100 tons, let it roll free at 5 or 6 miles an hour, and the momentum in it is staggering. The instant it meets the car waiting for it, the shock travels through both like an accident. Couplers drive together. Draft gear soaks up whatever it can manage. Every item inside both cars pitches forward at once. If it happens to be a boxcar full of canned goods or machined parts, the price is a handful of crushed cans and a pallet knocked out of line. Annoying, not a crisis. Now change the cargo. Put chlorine or anhydrous ammonia inside that tank. Or stack 2 decks of new sedans straight off the assembly line onto a rack. Or make it a 100-foot passenger coach being dead-headed across the country with nobody riding in it. That is precisely the gap those 3 words fill. Do Not Hump is a required marking on any car whose lading, whose construction, or whose contents cannot take the repeated blows that hump classification delivers. The stencil is an instruction to the yard crew: cut this one out of the train before it ever reaches the grade. It goes through the yard the slow way, nudged into place by a switcher, with no free roll and no impact at the bottom. More cars carry the marking than most people would guess. Tank cars in hazardous service head the list. That covers the whole spread, from crude and ethanol through the poison inhalation hazards such as chlorine and anhydrous ammonia. A hump coupling can put strain on the tank shell, wreck valves, split fittings, and in the worst outcome undermine the structural soundness of the car. Federal rules cap coupling speeds tightly wherever hazmat is involved, and certain classes are barred from the hump outright. Auto carriers running loaded wear the same stencil. A multi-deck rack may hold 10 or 12 finished vehicles, every one of them held down by wheel chocks and chain tie-downs. Hit that rack hard, and vehicles shove against their restraints, panels dimple, glass cracks, and a car can break free of its mounting altogether. When a manufacturer has several $100,000 of finished product riding on one piece of equipment, there is no such thing as an acceptable minor impact. The restriction extends to intermodal flats carrying containers and highway trailers. Twist locks are all that hold a container to the deck, and a sharp enough blow can jar them open or throw the contents around inside. Trailers riding spine cars or well cars sit in the same category. Whoever loaded them packed for the buzz of interstate pavement, not for 2 rail cars meeting at 6 miles an hour. Passenger equipment moving in freight consists gets the same treatment. Charter operators and preservation groups own a good deal of this, and the trade calls it private varnish. These cars were finished out for people to live in, not to survive industrial punishment. One hard coupling can split windows, destroy light fixtures, take out air conditioning machinery, and demolish anything not fastened to the deck. Dimensional loads stay off the hump too. Cargo that pushes past standard clearance envelopes distributes its weight in odd ways and behaves unpredictably on the curved geometry of a bowl. And there is one more group that rarely comes up. Loads that are simply liable to move around, heavy equipment chained to a flat car or lumber stacked on bulkhead flats, draw the same restriction whenever the shipper or the railroad decides the tie-down arrangement will not survive a coupling. The Association of American Railroads issues switching charts of remarkable specificity, laying out precisely which marked and placarded cars may go over a hump, which face reduced speed at the coupling, and which are prohibited from the grade entirely. Few safety frameworks anywhere in freight run to that level of detail. But something about this still bothers people. If the process is that brutal, what possessed the railroads to construct their entire sorting operation around it? Because from the very beginning, the brutality itself was the thing being engineered against. Early on, a brakeman on the roof was the only thing regulating speed. Then, across the 1930s and 1940s, retarders started going in. These are massive steel assemblies set beside the running rails, closing on a car's wheels to bleed off speed. Picture an enormous set of pliers clamped onto the wheel flanges, turning motion into heat and sound. Stand anywhere near one while it works, and you will never mistake it for anything else. The noise is a metallic scream that reaches the far end of the yard. A modern hump slows each car at several stages of its descent. The master retarder, positioned close to the summit, takes an initial bite out of every car that comes over. Farther down, group retarders guarding the entrance to each cluster of classification tracks trim the speed more precisely. Certain yards add inert retarders as well, small unpowered units set into the rail that drag on the wheels by friction alone, easing a car through the last stretch before contact. Automation runs the whole sequence in a current hump yard. Sensors along the track weigh each car and gauge how freely it rolls the moment it crosses the crest. From that, a computer works out the precise speed required for a soft coupling against whatever already occupies the assigned track, factoring in the distance to be covered, the grade, the curves, the wind, even the air temperature, since cold stiffens the wheel bearings and changes how a car rolls. The retarders respond on their own, squeezing exactly hard enough to hand the car off at the correct velocity. The switches throw electrically, guiding it down through the ladder without a person laying a hand on anything. Most yards aim for a coupling somewhere in the 4 to 10 miles per hour band. Sounds harmless enough, until you remember a loaded car can exceed 100 tons. Even at 4 miles per hour, there is real energy in that contact. Draft gear, the heavy-duty shock absorber sitting inside the coupler pocket, exists to eat that energy, and its capacity has a ceiling. When circumstances line up badly, a retarder that underperforms, or a car that comes down faster than the model predicted, the outcome gets ugly. None of this belongs to the past tense, which is why it still comes up. Out on the Nebraska plains at North Platte, the cycle runs continuously inside Union Pacific's Bailey Yard, every hour of every day in the year. Nothing else on Earth classifies more cars. Bailey covers 2,850 acres and runs 8 miles along the Nebraska prairie. Lay its track out in a single line, and you would have 315 miles of rail, about what separates North Platte from Omaha. In any given day, upward of 14,000 cars move through. Roughly 3,000 of them get sorted across the yard's pair of humps, the eastbound crest standing 34 feet and the westbound one rising 20 feet. If this is the kind of engineering story you want more of, and you would like to understand what actually keeps American railroading moving, take a second to subscribe. There's a new one every week. Golden Spike Tower gives visitors an observation deck looking down on the whole operation. Cars come over the crest at a rate of 4 a minute, part from the consist, and coast away into the bowl almost without sound. Beneath the deck, 114 tracks open outward, like the ribs of some enormous steel fan. Every one of them is a strand of an outbound train being braided together a car at a time, with gravity carrying most of the load. 34 feet is what the eastbound hump gives you. Modest on paper, but for a car loaded to anywhere between 30 and 140 tons, that is ample elevation to carry it a quarter mile or better into the bowl. The westbound side tops out at 20 feet, a difference that reflects the grades and track layout over on that half of the property. Even here, though, some cars never see the grade. Anything stenciled "Do Not Hump" comes out of the train before the shove begins. Those cars go onto holding tracks and get worked on their own, flat switched into their outbound consists by yard power. It burns clock. It burns labor. It interrupts what would otherwise be a seamless gravity-fed rhythm. The alternative is worse. We know what happens when a car goes over that shouldn't, because it has been investigated. Canada's Transportation Safety Board looked into a run of overspeed couplings at Canadian Pacific's Toronto yard during the winter of 2003. One involved a tank car holding sodium hydroxide residue cut loose from the hump and striking a stationary boxcar at something close to 12 miles an hour, far beyond the intended figure. Another saw a tank car of naphthalene benzene leave the group retarder at almost 16 miles an hour. Equipment damage resulted in both, though no product escaped and nobody was hurt. What the investigators pinned it on was retarder performance falling off in severe cold, combined with an automation system that had not compensated for the loss of braking effect. And if a marked car goes over anyway? The Transportation Technology Center at Pueblo, Colorado, ran tests that put numbers behind what crews had long known firsthand. As impact speed climbed, so did the damage, in steps. Striker plates fractured, brake hose castings broke, uncoupling levers snapped off, and one trial ended with a cracked coupler. The researchers also flagged how much depended on where the incoming coupler sat laterally, since that governed whether the joint made cleanly or produced a failure to couple, with the cars rebounding off each other or riding up over one another entirely. For a car wearing that stencil, none of this is theoretical. These are exactly the events the marking is there to head off. There is a second story running underneath all of this, and it is a story of contraction. The count peaked in 1975 at 152 humps across North America. Railroads had poured billions into them because nothing else could process the sheer tonnage of mixed freight arriving one carload at a time. One hump could push out 1,500 to 3,000 cars daily. A throughput flat switching had no hope of matching. Then the business itself changed shape. Merger after merger squeezed the Class 1 roster from dozens of names down to 6. Traffic reorganized itself. Intermodal, in which containers and trailers move on dedicated trains that run origin to destination and never get classified at all, exploded. Unit trains of a single commodity, coal or grain, skipped the classification yards altogether. The individual carload business, the very thing humps were designed to handle, began a long and steady slide. Precision scheduled railroading arrived next. PSR is an operating doctrine developed by E. Hunter Harrison, first put to work at Illinois Central during the 1990s, and later carried to CSX, Canadian National, and Canadian Pacific. Its central premise is that cars move faster when fewer hands touch them. Block the traffic where it originates. Depart on a published schedule instead of holding a train until enough cars accumulate to make it worthwhile. Trade whole blocks between trains at intermediate points and never take them apart. Under that doctrine, a facility built expressly to tear trains down and rebuild them from nothing turned into something its advocates had not anticipated. It turned into the choke point. Harrison's CSX shut down 8 of its 12 humps. Norfolk Southern killed 4 inside 12 months, taking down Bellevue in Ohio, Sheffield in Alabama, Linwood in North Carolina, and Allentown in Pennsylvania, while rolling out its own PSR variant under the name Top 21. Union Pacific pulled the plug on the hump at Proviso, outside Chicago, a yard that had opened in 1929 as the largest in the world. One Union Pacific executive pointed out that Proviso still had human operators working the retarders to govern speeds into the bowl, a practice unchanged in decades. Nationwide, the working hump count, 152 strong in 1975, bottomed out at 36. PSR does not deserve all the blame. Consolidation had already pooled traffic flows and made duplicate facilities redundant. The long migration away from single carload freight toward containers and unit trains meant less material needed classifying to begin with. And keeping tired retarder machinery alive at yards running below capacity got progressively harder to defend on paper. The closures were not the last chapter, though. When freight volumes spiked after the pandemic tore through global supply chains, more than one railroad discovered it no longer had the classification capacity it needed. Norfolk Southern fired the hump back up at Brosnan Yard, down in Macon, Georgia. Shippers went on record saying that restarting those operations helped clear the network and brought reliability back. One logistics executive told an industry gathering that returning humps to service produced a measurable improvement in how freight moved system-wide. Did anybody see that coming? Almost certainly not, and the about-face happened fast. Union Pacific's chief executive, Jim Vena, put the case bluntly to investors. There is no defect in the hump concept at all. For a yard turning somewhere between 1,800 and 2,000 cars in a day, he argued, no method beats it, nothing costs less, and the thing simply does its job. BNSF, for its part, runs 8 humps across a network of 32,000 miles, and it put money into a new master retarder at Northtown in Minneapolis after close to 10 years of service and around 1,500 cars crossing daily. Crews ripped out the worn unit, put in a new scale at the top of the hump, and worked their way through 53 bowl tracks to restore the yard to full capability. So those three words are not merely an odd bit of lettering on the side of a car. They mark a border between two different versions of how a railroad operates. On the near side lies the graceful, gravity-powered efficiency of the hump, a method that has been sorting freight through pure physics for something close to a century and a half. On the far side sit the cars that would not come through it intact, the ones carrying freight too volatile, too delicate, or too costly to be turned loose down a grade and into a scheduled collision with whatever waits at the bottom. Next time a long freight has you stopped at a crossing, watching it creep past, hunt for those three white words along a tank car or a closed auto rack. They are a reminder that even inside an industry that runs on raw force at enormous scale, certain things still have to be handled softly. And if you are curious how railroads cracked another of their oldest engineering problems, that video is on your screen right now.